As my junior year in high school came to a close, the summer months looked to be very bleak. I had no plans, I had no job, and all I had to look forward to was playing softball or football in the local park. My dad, however, came to my rescue and after speaking with my uncle, informed me that I had a job opportunity if I wanted. My uncle Bob explained to me that his good friend Ray had offered to take me for the summer up in Lotus, California to help him on his cattle ranch. I would be paid $125 plus room and board for the entire summer. Never having worked with cattle before, I came up with many excuses, all of which faded as I learned more about the job. I was told that it would not be easy, being as how I had to work from about 5 in the morning until 9 or 10 at night, 7 days a week with only every other Saturday night off. So, with that all decided, I packed a bag and off we went. Lotus, California is a small town north of Sacramento and kind of close to Placerville, California. When we arrived at the ranch, I was kinda surprised, having expected a big house, big barn and many cowboys, but all I saw was a regular house in a small barn. Ray came out to greet us and after the introductions, my uncle took off and there I was all alone and not having the faintest idea of what to do. As it turns out, the first thing on the menu was to learn how to saddle a horse. Surprisingly, that turned out to be a very interesting lesson in and of itself. It seems that when a saddle is being put on a horse, the horse somehow expands its body by inflating its lungs so that if you don't tighten the straps right and then try to mount the horse, the saddle slips around and you fall on your butt. When Ray showed me how to do it, it seemed pretty simple. All you have to do is knee the horse into its side and they expel the air. Then you tighten the strap as tight as you can. So, after the saddle was on the horse, we went for a ride to show me the route that we were going to take. We had to move about 400 head of cattle up to the summer pasture in the mountains. When we went inside the house, Ray showed me where I was going to sleep and as it turned out the couch was all mine. Up in that part of the country during the summer it's pretty hot and humid. The house did not have an air conditioner but they did have one of those evaporation coolers. Needless to say, it wasn't anywhere near as efficient as an air conditioner. The next day I found out that the cattle would be separated into several different meadows, all of which had good grass and water and were fenced in. Some held 20 or 30 cows, some held 50, and some held only 10. Each meadow had its own barbed wire fence which had to be put up every year and taken down at the end of the summer. So, the next day we drove up to the meadows and we started to put up the barbed wire fence which consisted of 3 strands of barbed wire stapled into the various trees that surrounded the meadow. That was an experience in itself because it was very easy while holding the staple to smash your finger with a hammer. Well, we got the job done in a few days and the very next day we started out with the herd. Surprisingly, there was no problem riding the horse. However, I can tell you that at the end of the first day, I found it very difficult to walk without pain. What with riding every day, the pain went away and I found myself very comfortable riding the horse. OMG. I can tell you from experience that cows appear to be dumber than a rock. It seemed to me that the only thing they were interested in was eating and making cow pies. We got the herd to the mountain pastures in about a week and once they were in their assigned meadow, that part of the job was done. I wondered what was coming next. Over dinner that evening and breakfast the next day Ray informed me that he had a contract with the government to keep certain trails clear of falling trees so that doctors, emergency personnel and the mail could use the trail with no problems. We had to use the horses and an additional pack horse. The pack horse carried 2 saddlebags which contained a chainsaw, extra blades, the sharpening file, gasoline, wedges, and our lunch. I have to put in a few words here about Marie, who was Ray's wife. She was a really nice lady and worked her butt off. The meals she made and the food we ate was amazing. For example, breakfast consisted of eggs, bacon, pancakes, toast, sausage and mashed potatoes. I found out that the reason for the mashed potatoes was that the 2 hired hands and Ray's father had very few teeth between them. After a few days of working, I was amazed at how much I would eat at breakfast and dinner. I came to realize that during the day I was expending so much energy working that I burned a tremendous amount of calories and I was always hungry. In any case, as we moved down the trail, there were trees all around and all of a sudden we would come to a fallen tree from which a large piece had to be removed. I can tell you that I have seen some big trees in my day, but when a fully grown sugar pine falls over the trail, its diameter was taller than me. Sawing a 10-foot wide piece from the middle of that tree was no easy task, and it was a bit on the dangerous side. We had to be real careful because once you cut the slice out of the middle and trees being round, it could easily roll and usually did. So, if you were in the wrong place, serious injury could occur. And don't forget we were miles from any help. The job of clearing the trail might seem to be a bit boring, but as we moved along day by day it was so peaceful and quiet that it actually was very inspiring. It gave time to do a lot of thinking about many things. One of my jobs was to go on ahead and find any small little trees that had fallen and only their tops were on the trail. I would then chop them out with an axe. One mistake I made was the boots I bought. They had leather soles which are very slippery when there are a lot of pine needles. The first time out I was slipping all over the place. Smiley face. I solved that problem by taking them to the shoemaker and having rubber soles installed, which completely solved that problem. Ray showed me several houses that had been built decades before, and although they were falling apart, they could provide shelter and secret stashes of food. In case anyone was stranded by snow or whatever, one would not starve or freeze to death. One day as we were about ready to take off down the trail, and one of the forest rangers came over and said there was a forest fire. He was looking for people to find it and help put it out. I soon found out that the ranger actually had the power to draft me if I didn't volunteer. We ended up with a group of about 10 people. Off we went down the trail in search of the fire. None of us were prepared for this, as all we had were the clothes that we were wearing. No one planned on being conscripted to fight a forest fire that day, but there we were. Lol. As the sun went down, it started to get really cold. We stopped at a point where the trail crossed the creek, lit a fire, and because the temperature plummeted. That night, while trying to sleep, we all had to move closer to the fire to try to keep warm, as we had no sleeping bags or blankets. Every 15 or 30 minutes you had to turn your backside or front side towards the fire where it was warm. Needless to say, no one was able to sleep much. Next morning, the ranger used his radio to find what direction we should head, and off we went. As it turned out, it took us 2 days to find the fire, which was located on the side of a very steep hill. A short while after arriving, an airplane flew over and dropped big 5-gallon cans of food and sleeping bags, first aid kits, lights, etc. The hill was so steep, the sleeping bags had to be placed on the uphill side of a tree, or you risked rolling down the hill in your sleep. We had no food, and only the water we had was from the creek. A plus point was we were getting paid 24 hours a day because we had no sleeping gear or food. However, the rate of pay was $2 an hour. Lol. There was one scary part when I had to go back to the point on the trail across the creek where we had stopped and bring Ray back with the chainsaws to cut down any smoldering snags, as they were called. We were in a very remote part of the forest, and of course, never having been there before, I had no idea where I was. Fortunately, I have a good sense of direction, and I was smart enough, on my way out, to chop pieces out of the trees in both directions so I would be able to find my way back. The trip was uneventful, and we were able to find our way back quickly because of the marks in the trees. The only bad part was that Ray had a horse to ride, and he laughed all the way because I had to walk. Smiley face. The rest of the summer seemed to fly by quickly, and before I knew it, it was time to return to my senior year at South San Francisco High School. When I got home, I was surprised to discover that everyone said that I had really changed during that summer. It seems that I had grown about 6 inches, lost about 30 pounds, and developed some bigger muscles. This was more in evidence when I returned to my senior classes because it seemed that I was being noticed a lot more by the ladies. That experience was well worth the time, and even if I had to pay for it, it would be well worth it. As a side note, I discovered Pat had to leave school and got married. More on that later.